I want to thank you for being here on Tax Day, and thank you to the Republican Study Committee for bringing us together to talk about how the working families' tax cuts are helping Americans keep more of what they earn, expand their businesses, and have a stronger financial security for their families. North Texas job creators have repeatedly told me how much they enjoy and appreciate the working families' tax cuts that are prioritizing their ability to grow, invest in their futures, and focus on private sector jobs and job expansion rather than vast government spending that we saw during the Biden administration. And whether it's using the permanent 20% pass-through deduction that ensures that our small businesses have long-term tax certainty to plan and save, or the full and immediate expensing for investments in equipment and technology, machinery that help them to expand their operations. Small businesses in North Texas are growing thanks to the reforms that we delivered in working families tax cuts. And I just want to repeat how important making the pass-through deduction permanent for our Main Street businesses, our local job creators. This is critical long-term relief to millions of pass-through businesses who can now have a clear picture of what their tax environment will be for years into the future. And having that certainty, one of the things I heard all of it, over and over and over again from the small business communities, but we can play by the rules, but we need to know what the rules are. And I think having that certainty may be one of the most important aspects of our important tax reform package. So for North Texas businesses, just knowing that these reforms were taking effect, we actually saw enthusiasm just from knowing that for business expansion. And we had our 4th North Texas job fair last August, and the response from the business and employees was the largest that we have ever seen. We had more than 500 businesses, we had Fortune 500 companies, we had small mom and pops, and we had over 35,000 people who came out to look for a job. And they were looking for a new career, they were looking for better benefits, more flexibility, and new opportunities. And we saw that it's become the largest independent job fair in the country. And when we see this kind of impact firsthand that strengthens our private sector, that's when we know that our steadfast commitment to focusing on Main Street expansion over Wall Street or Washington bureaucracies is really making a difference. It's making a difference in the lives of American citizens who deserve to earn more, to keep more, and be free from the destruction that's left behind after the Biden-Harris and unified Democrat control. So now, thanks to the working families tax cuts, we are in a new era of making sure Americans keep more of what they earn and are paid more for the work that they're doing to be able to support their families. And in fact, because of our commitment of putting American people first and their livelihoods first, a family of 4 with 2 kids earning up to $73,000, taking only the boosted standard deduction and bigger child tax credit, will have no federal income tax liability whatsoever. And that's real relief. And that can go toward grocery bills, medical bills, housing, kids' education, childcare costs, and all necessities that Republicans are helping to ensure that families can pay for and that were strained under the Democrat policies that left America really impoverished. So we're delivering on promises like no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, meaning that our hourly workers are keeping more of their hard-earned money. No tax on overtime alone will boost income for nearly 80 million hourly workers by as much as $1,400 a year. And if you work extra, you get to keep that money. And Republicans in Congress are committed to ensuring that happens. This tax day, let's recommit ourselves to strengthening America's small businesses, our vital middle class, and to renew our determination to further limit federal taxation and regulations so that our hard-working American job creators are free to do what they do best. And that's to innovate, to serve new customers, and to uplift our nation in ways that no government program could ever pretend to achieve. And so thank you again for being here. We look forward to hearing your stories and learning how we can further pass the kind of tax reforms that strengthen our nation and secure our America First future for our children and our grandchildren. And with that, I would love to hear from Representative Eric Donald.
Thanks, Beth. You just illustrated what so many Americans are feeling. They're seeing a real benefit from what we did with the One Big Beautiful Bill, we now call it Working Families Tax Cut, because that's really what it was. In Alabama, the average taxpayer middle class taxpayer, working family tax paying family will see a $2,843 tax cut this year. Nationwide, the number is estimated to be about $2,300 for working families. These are not just numbers. This is easing the pressure that so many families have felt for the last several years. And we're not done. Tax return refunds this year are going to be about 10% higher for many working families. I believe goes even further. Some are seeing little to no income tax liability at all, as Jeff pointed out, which means more of their paycheck stays in their pockets from the start. It's not just about the refunds. Americans from every walk of life are benefiting from the working family tax cuts. Workers are keeping more of their overtime pay and tips. Seniors are getting relief on Social Security, and even newborn children are receiving a $1,000 investment in their future by enrolling in the Trump accounts. I want to point out that in Alabama, over 930,000 senior citizens on Social Security. That's 18% of the population are not going to pay any tax on Social Security. When you look at the Alabamans working in restaurants, hotels, and the tourism industry as delivery drivers, they're going to save over $2,000 this year by having to pay taxes on their tips. These are practical, real-world changes that make a difference in people's day-to-day lives. And we're fortunate enough to hear stories from how these provisions are impacting people today. One of the other things I want to point out in the bill, and I'm sure my friend Robert Moore will address this, is the death tax issue. When I ran a think tank back in, I guess, the late 90s when we started this effort to deal with death tax, this bill contained provisions that gave a $15 million exemption for individuals, $30 million for couples. That's going to save thousands of ranches and farms and small businesses. This was a cloud that hung over the heads of people all over the country. And this, what we did last year with this bill gives tremendous relief to those folks. We've got more work to do on capital gains, things like that. We want to encourage more investment. We want people to start businesses, and providing a path forward with sensible tax laws is a huge step in that direction. So House Republicans are focused on making sure people who work hard, play by the rules, take care of their families, get to keep more of what they earn, and that they're not left behind. This year, that's exactly what we're delivering, and today we're seeing the results firsthand. How do you know about it?
Well, we're grateful today to have a number of people who are experiencing this and have some fantastic stories. So if we don't mind, can we just go around the table and have you just introduce yourselves before we open to the House?
Good morning. My name is Will McLaughlin. I'm one of the co-founders with my partner Patrick Ford right over there. We're Marine Corps veterans. We started a company called Americans about 5.5 years ago. We're a portable sanitation company, so portable toilets, restroom trailers, those kind of things. Started here in Northern Virginia and we expanded out to several different states.
I'm Lindsay Flatfield. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I used to work on the Hill for 15 years, and now I have 2 small children that I'm homeschooling in Northern Virginia. Hoping to extend my stay-at-home mom contract with more children in the next couple of years. But that's what I'm doing now. Happy to be here.
Good morning, Jorge Martinez, Defend Forgotten America. So we exist to fight for the people who feel like Washington forgot about them. People that rise up early, stay late, and still wonder if they're getting ahead. So commend you for having us here and look forward to the discussion.
Marlon Stutzman, Indiana's 3rd Congressional District. I just want to say thank you to all of you who come. I come from a business background, agriculture and manufacturing, and I know how tough it is. As we were talking about the restaurant business, it's been tough over the last several years, but I just want to say thank you to you. I'll keep my comments for later, but you make America work, and so appreciate your hard efforts, and we're here to support you.
I'm Alex Butterworth. By day, I'm an attorney for Uber Eats, and about 2 years ago, I made the decision to invest in a restaurant, Butterworth's, right here on Capitol Hill. We obviously have been dealing with the struggling restaurant industry and opening a new business in that environment. And certainly things like the no tax on tips has helped us with labour costs and employing the right people, and a huge advantage to our staff.
We come to your place all the time.
Yeah.
So appreciate you opening and running such a great establishment.
Morning, my name is Nate D'Amico. I'm a former Navy officer and a defense contractor, and we're recently a bartender in Alexandria, and also grew up in a small family-owned restaurant run by my folks. So I've spent a long time in and out of both of those industries.
Tom Tiffany, Wisconsin 7. I sure wish when we had our business wilderness cruises that we had no taxes on tips and overtime.
Yeah, okay. My name's Kevin McEwen. I'm from Elizabethtown, Kentucky. I do work as an independent contractor with DoorDash, and I've been doing this for about 3 or 4 years now. Just coming to spread my remarks on the impact that no tax on tips has had on myself and others in our industry.
Awesome. I'm Dennis Farina from Virginia Beach, Virginia, and my company is Executive Beverage. I'm in food, beverage, and hospitality. Had a brunch place for a little while and exited, and I've had 34 employees at that restaurant and 60 to 70 bartenders and waiters that work with us, just like DoorDash drivers throughout the Hampton Roads region. So thank you for having me.
I'm Chuck Edwards. I represent North Carolina's 11th Congressional District, the mountains of western North Carolina that are chock full of good, solid, salt-of-the-earth working Americans that are benefiting from the working families tax cuts.
I'm Bart DeLuca, independent financial planner. I'm from Suburban Partner.
And we're also grateful today to have on tax day, to have Marcus with us from ATR.
Americans for Tax Firm, we keep a running list of things that have been in the newspaper, things that people brought to our attention, people telling their own stories on what no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, the lower investment costs because of permanent expensing. And it's amazing the tremendous feedback that we're getting, and that people recognize that these tax reductions being made permanent is so important. Actually, Don was mentioning permanence on the expensing. When you look at expensing in the United States, or investment in the United States, when they think that the previous tax cuts on expensing, going to expensing or speed up depreciation, as soon as they're about to fade, there's a whole bunch of investment. And then when they drop, the investment naturally goes down. And it ought not to be going with the tax policy, to have permanent expensing allowing you to invest when it makes economic sense and always making better tax sense. It's a huge step forward in your comments on the death tax. Having permanency there, we haven't had permanent death tax numbers for a long time. Remember, we had no death tax for 1 year, and then that went poof. Allowing people to be able to plan, knowing what's protected and what's not on a permanent basis. And even in the marginal tax rates for individuals, we haven't had permanent tax rates for individuals since Reagan's '86. All of the previous ones were, we cut them, and then 5 years or 6 years or something, they start to disappear again and have to relitigate, or they go away. So that the permanence has been powerful in making people be able to hire, invest, create jobs, big step forward.
So we have a bunch of people here today. I appreciate you all introducing yourselves, but I really want to hear your stories. And there was so much that was packed in. We see that one big, beautiful bill. It was massive. And it wasn't something that we threw together overnight. We worked on that bill for 2-3 years. But I'm curious as to what aspects of that bill that you feel were most beneficial to what you do. So you go ahead and start.
Yeah, so I was invited to speak here today, and they asked, how did you personally benefit from the bill? And I emailed my account. I'm looking Grover, by the way, pleasure to be sitting here next to you. I saw
I
the
thought you were saying
list.
Grover was your accountant. I
And I saw the list, I said, Harvard, because he's the tax guy, this is really cool, so. But anyway, I did receive some benefit on my personal taxes. The permanence of the tax cuts, my CPA said over the years, that will help you. I work mostly with retired seniors in the Mid-Atlantic area. So I've been doing this about 25 years on my own for 5. And retirement planning is quite challenging. I refer to this as kind of like Gen 2 of retirement planning. Like Gen 1 was like the 70s and 80s. Most people would go work for a company for 35 years and they would retire. They would get Social Security, they would get a pension, maybe have some CDs at the bank, like 401ks, stocks were not widely owned. So most of the onus fell really on the company and the government, not the individual. So now we have, the individual, and if I kind of think about my career, like what were really big challenges for retirees? 2008, obviously, because of the stock market crash, even pieces of the bond market, like that was very challenging. Second to that, though, was 2022, where we had a massive spike in inflation. So we went from 2% to 9% because we were thrown, we had COVID and we said, okay, we have this pandemic, how are we going to combat this? We're just going to throw money at helicopters, right? And we just spend money and then boom, people went back to work and started consuming and we had 9% inflation. So to commiserate with all my clients, what I told them is, when you have an inflation spike, stocks drop. So, even retired clients typically have, 30, 40, 50% of stocks, and their stocks are dropping. Inflation bonds drop. Cocktail trivia, 2022 was the worst year in US history for the bond market. We lost like 13%. So we have these retirees that the onus is on them, stocks are dropping, bonds are dropping, their cost of everything is going up 9 or 10%. Now that's CPI, right? So if you look at like what retirees are actually consuming, like healthcare expenses, they're going up by even more. So it's a really, really challenging environment. Now we have been somewhat bailed out by the stock market over the last 3 years. ChatGPT is released, market kicks up, and people are doing better. But really what's helping my clients, the extra standard deduction, the extra $6,000, couple $1,000 here or there, to combat these higher expenses. And I think especially most of my clients are in the DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia area. Cost of living is very high. So that's been, a very positive thing. I've been talking to a lot of clients over like the last week or two, and I kind of, I know the answer, right? How are you doing on your taxes? And, people on both sides of the aisle, because after a while, where your clients land. The Republicans, this is great, getting all this money back. And then, the other people say, I got some money back, it wasn't too bad, So, no, it's been very helpful. And hopefully, the economy continues to expand, stock market continues to do well, we get inflation under control. But, on the margin, those little tax cuts have certainly helped on the seniors. And then I'll just give you a little feedback on myself and then I'll move on. The two things I said I didn't benefit that much from OBBA. The two things, if I look back like on my career, what's allowed me to invest in my business, try to grow my business, and it's hired my first junior planners. I got a 24-year-old out of Gettysburg, and I'm kind of mentoring him. Proud of that. He just hit his first year. Getting rid of AMT, I think it wasn't the first go around. I got crushed by AMT. I don't even know why. Like, it's one of those things. I'm a CFP. I'm pretty good at taxes. It's so complicated. I was getting snagged by that every year. So those extra funds in my pocket that I can invest in my business were very, very positive. And then you may know this. I don't know when this provision took place, but basically I was an employee of a big group, and they sold up, and I bought out my chunk of the business. And what I paid for it, I could expense over 15 years. So the tax code really incentivizes people to, take risks. I'm sorry?
I said right.
Oh, so take risks and incentivize you to invest in your business, so I can expense that over 15 years. So those two provisions, like for me, have been amazing, allowed me to, invest in my business, try to grow, hire people, so.
I love to hear that. Invest, hire, grow. What about you?
Well, yeah, first, thank you for having me. I think it's the greatest bill to hit the floor in ages, so it's amazing. But under Farino Hospitality and Entertainment, my operating company, we operate food and beverage models in Hampton Roads, and we have restaurants. We're looking at a winery deal, and we have executive beverage, which is one of our main revenue generators. And we started in 2010 with one bartender, and fast forward to today, we have like 65, 70 bartenders and waiters that rely on us for tips and gratuities and wages. And when we talk about this bill, I can illustrate briefly how important it is for guys like Ramsey who have a newborn baby and use tips for diapers and to pay rent and things like that. And they can take $25,000 right off the top of their income before taxes even be assessed. And for guys like Devon on my team who has a kid and he manages a barbecue spot and works events on the weekends, it's a big deal for them because they're spending time with me. They're spending time at weddings and corporate events and sometimes gubernatorial events and things for the Governor Youngkin or whomever. And now it seems that the state has their back and they're putting more money back in their pocket. So my team is thrilled. They're very excited. I have people like Janine who she homeschools her kids and she works 3 jobs and worked at one of my restaurants and picks up events on the weekends. And, this is really impactful for them. So, executive beverage has found it a little more lubricating in the labor market. We're able to use this as an attractive measure for our workforce to come in. And, if you're a teacher and you're just getting by and you actually bartended in college and you're quite good and you like to do some fundraisers or some weddings, you can do those with executive beverage and not get taxed on your tips until you make $25,000. So it's another incentive to get them into the market, to get them into another income generating stream. And also it removes a big stress burden on the employees. There's a lot of times where I'd be telling my employees that I'm not an accountant and to refer to guys like him over there. So, I'd have to tell them, I'd recommend, I'm not an accountant, I'd recommend holding 10% minimum of your tips. Just put it in a piggy bank. Now they don't have to even think about that or stress about it because that's a big burden for them. Like these level line associates who are earning gratuities and tips, they don't know how much should I keep when I need to pay rent, my rent's late and my bills need to be paid and I need to buy diapers for my baby. So God bless America, God bless Donald Trump and the legislators who got this done. Executive beverage is thrilled, Hampton Roads is thrilled, and I know America over time will be very, very thrilled about this bill. So thank you for having me and we appreciate what you do.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate, first of all the hard work that everybody at the table has done to further the advent of taking home our taxpayers' money back so we can put it more to our own personal use instead of going it somewhere else along the way. But the tax on tips has been impacted, just one of the impacts of the tax bill that I'm going to talk about. Of course, I'm a senior citizen, and so therefore, a whole gamut of the tax bill impacted me. I was more than grateful to have all of that come my way. So, but I, just speaking for people that are in my industry, first of all, it was important, I think, because of the impact that we as independent contractors under the system have been able to take advantage of. Tax programs like this have been, first of all, I think very important to our industry. That we were never really entitled to many of the perks that someone working for larger companies has been able to take advantage of. So being able to pass that through to us as independent contractors has been pretty important, I think, as a part of that. And the advent of this bill is been pretty dramatic, so without getting into too much of the nuts and bolts of this, it's, I'd saved 1 month's mortgage on my tax bill anyhow, so that's a bit important. And speaking of, he was talking about the gentleman on the corner down there talked about the impact of, 2020 on I started building a new house, and by the time I was done, it was dramatically, it increased the cost of the house to me, substantially, and cost of materials had gone up substantially. Then by the time it came down to finalizing it and putting it into the interest rate on the mortgage, it was doubled my payment. So therefore, I had to do something, so I went back to work. But that's where I am with it. Thank you.
Yes, morning, man. I am another one of the frontline guys. I've been bartending down in Alexandria for about a year now, and it's a lot of fun. Meet a lot of interesting people, as I'm sure you all can relate to working here. And as you may imagine, my primary motivation was living in a city that's been in deep blue hands for a long time. The costs are exorbitant. I first lived here as an undergrad at GW in 2012, and things have only gone through the ceiling since then. So this was in large part designed to supplement my income and my finances. And about 2 months after I started that, the conversation started coming up really heavy about the no tax on tips and overtime, which was something that was not a personal concern to me during the campaign in 2024 because I wasn't in that role. But I was obviously supportive of it, coming from a family restaurant where that would have been a great benefit to the couple of dozen employees that my folks had. Come last summer, I was personally very excited about it because it meant that it would, not only would I have the supplemental income, but thanks to the president's plan and to you all for executing it, that would personally benefit me, and I would get to keep more of that supplemental income. Which for me is translated, like Mr. McEwen mentioned, equivalent of a couple months worth of rent, increased savings for my retirement, for a home plan, or a home fund rather, future plans. So it's been, of immense benefit, very beneficial to me. And a lot of folks, I'm lucky that this is supplemental for me. A lot of folks that I work with who rely on service industry careers as their primary source of income and supporting their families. Huge boon to them. It's actually the equivalent is a bigger pay raise for them than I've gotten in my full-time job in the past several years. So, and to the point that was made before, they don't have to wait to file a tax return to get it back, or I should say we don't have to wait to file a tax return. That's money that is staying in people's hands every day, week. If they are able to access that immediately, improve their standard of living, plan for their futures, support their children, whether that be, child care, education. So it is, it's a real immense benefit to them. And, we all hear on the news, there's always talk about fiscal policy and, economic philosophy and budget planning and all of that. And I think that goes over a lot of people's heads, myself included, if I'm being honest. And, it's not something that the average person on the street is usually talking about. But over the summer, I had folks at bartenders, waitresses, some of them as young as high school, some of them, 40s, 50s, folks who've been doing it their whole careers. And they were talking about it. They were talking about the one big beautiful bill and no tax on tips. And I don't know if they were paying close enough attention to know to thank all of you in this room for being part of that. But the average man or woman on the street was talking about, tax policy, which is not something.
You mean it wasn't just the billionaires?
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the average person. And, I actually interned for Grover about a decade and change ago. And so I got really into taxes at that time as a GW undergrad who was interning in politics. And didn't hear that level of discussion about it again until last year when folks were talking about, this is going to be a huge benefit to me personally. All the stuff on the news can go over people's heads, can be something that they just don't really pay attention to, but this is something, having extra money in your pocket at the end of the week is something that everybody, pays very good attention to. It's a real, a real tangible benefit. And again, thanks you all here for supporting that and for enacting the President's vision. And my dad, I talked to my dad yesterday, he asked me to say thanks also for the Social Security tax relief. He turned 70 this year, so he asked me to mention that as well.
Chalice, where are you thinking? What is wrong?
So I think interesting part about my own personal story, I'm here as a guest. I'm an H-1B visa worker. And so firstly, it's an honor to be a guest of this country. It's wonderful to be here. It's a wonderful country. And it's one that I want to contribute to and grow. And so, rather than doing my corporate job and just taking that money and taking it back to Australia and investing it there, I want to invest here, create jobs for local people. And so, the stock and income that I receive from my day job as a visa worker, I can't have a second job. I'm here authorized to only do one job, but I am allowed to invest. And so I liquidated a certain amount of stock, of course, had to pay a lot of tax on that. Stock that you receive as an employee gets taxed not purely as capital gains, but partly as income, partly as capital gains. And so, I think that there's potentially an opportunity there to people who want to sell stock to invest it in job creating opportunities. I've had to pay a bunch of tax, and only what's left over could I then invest into creating this restaurant. Did it anyway, absolute passion project, and found a group of other people who not really in it for the money. We wanted to create something special in this city, contribute to the culture of the city. And so, we've been able to create, 20 to 30 jobs for local Americans. And of course, paying, there's local taxes, there's of course income tax that we have to withhold for those staff, and then a lot of those being tipped workers, and a lot of our very generous customers are good tippers, but having to then pay a lot of tax on that income, I think was a burden for a lot of those staff. A lot of our staff have another job. This is something that they do to supplement their income. And so the calculus for those staff to not do a service industry job, and once they get promoted in their day job, often they do go on to bigger and better things, and that's great, and we encourage that. But this helps with the calculus for them to do this additional work to receive that additional income, and work a few extra hours if they have to, and it's of course helping them. Inflation has been a problem since the pandemic. It's a problem for our food costs. We've of course seen rent costs and labour costs going up with local DC laws. This is probably the only area where we're seeing any sort of relief as a business on the other side. So great for our staff, great for the business, I think great for people wanting to invest in these sorts of passion projects and contributing to not just trying to make extra cash, but actually contributing to the culture and the economy of this country.
Thank you for having us again. I think when we hear from a lot of Americans across the country, this is very simple. What you guys said is not just about tax policy. It's about economic relief. It's about dignity. It's about people knowing that if they work hard, they can build a life and not just scrape by. And the monies that Americans around the country are getting to keep, that's not going offshore. That's being spent in their local communities. And that results in economic growth and job creation and real relief for the people that really need it. And I think, as Republicans, you have to continue to hammer this, and hammer the fact that, we spent 4 years of failed economic policy, some of the Biden-Harris years, that has contributed to a lot of the kind of challenges that we're facing today. And we got to give it time. But I think most Americans understand that because of failed Bidenomics and the green energy scam, et cetera, it doesn't take just a year to reverse all the damage that was caused in those 4 years. Obviously, echoing what everyone said, everyone loves the no taxes on tits and overtime and Social Security. We're hearing from a lot of parents about the Trump accounts and having the opportunity to build generational wealth for their families. That's extremely important for a lot of American families. And I just commend all of you here around the table, the members of Congress, for your work. And again, my suggestion is keep hammering that, because I think we're going to have a very impactful message going into November.
So as a fellow mom.
Yes, I was gonna say,
I want to hear
my turn.
Yeah, I want to hear this.
Well, I think this is the important thing. My focus no longer is on like my personal finances. I'm really focused now on how can I make sure that my children. I grew up on a farm in Alabama, came up here with nothing, not from your district, and I cannot tell you. People, I have friends that say like, oh, it's not that much money in the Trump years. Like, how much money are we really talking about? It is a life-changing amount of money that my children are going to have when they turn 18. And future children even more so. The younger ones might even lap the old ones. But I think also just something I haven't heard anyone mention is just kind of psychologically what's happening when you're talking to families and moms specifically around the country. I have 13 friends who are pregnant right now, and each of them talking about feeling like they can't get ahead, or feeling like, they almost like this feeling that the system is working against us, like you were saying about, we work so hard. And I'm stepping out of the workforce because I want to be able to stay home with my kids, and feeling like I can do that safely, and that I'm not putting my family in financial peril by doing that. But also just the flexibility that these accounts are going to give them, so that it's not just a 529 plan. It doesn't just have to be for education. They can start a small business. They can put a down payment on a house. It is actually life-changing. And I have a friend who's a single mom. Very different set of circumstances. And she's a barber. And this is, I know everyone talks about bartenders keeping their tips, but the conversation for her, the calculus for her, being able to keep that money, the conversations that we used to have, and just how far behind every month she felt like she was just barely breaking even or falling behind, and seeing how hard she was working was absolutely heartbreaking. And now for the first time in years, she's finally talking about, wow, I actually have enough to just go to Trader Joe's and buy whatever I want. And so it's not, I think we can kind of exist in these little bubbles of, very, very wealthy people. If you talk about how this is actually impacting people who are just making it by, I feel like that's where I want to see more of the message going. I want to see more talk about how this is affecting positively the people that usually don't get talked about. Not just college students, but people who are working class, door dashers, bartenders, barbers. Because those are the people who are doing the hard work, the silent work, but also a lot of us moms who are so worried about our children and what their future is going to hold, and just making sure that they're going to have a leg up, or even just the peace of mind that it gives me to know that they're going to have these accounts and they're going to be able to just have a great future because of it. So thank you guys. So
Chris, I really appreciate your cautious. They don't get talked about enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you putting a face to that. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah, again, appreciate the time. Thank you. A little bit of context, just to set table stakes, because I think it sort of helps us understand why this is so impactful for our business. We started our company 5.5 years ago. My partner Patrick and I, it was two of us. We had a mission before we had a business. The mission of our company is we wanted to combat the veteran suicide epidemic. We knew that one way we could do that, I had gotten out of the Marine Corps, Patrick was transitioning out. We spent a lot of time sitting around talking about, those concentric circles started getting tighter and tighter. People, hey, did you hear about so-and-so? Did you hear about so-and-so? And it's like, man, did you hear about so-and-so? And it got closer and closer. So we knew if we had a small business, we could hire veterans, bring them in, kind of give them purpose again, share experience, share understanding, deal with them, and give them a lot of grace. We also, through personal experience of our time in service, we wanted to support both our families. Family members of the fallen who died in service to this country. That's the two missions prongs of the mission set of our business. We knew that was the mission of the company before we had a company. Then we decided what company to do, right? You got 2 Marine Corps infantry officers. Not a whole lot going on upstairs, possibly, right? But there's a whole lot of grit and determination. Portable toilets, right? Super simple, low barriers to entry. All you got to be able to do is handle being uncomfortable and working really hard. Fast forward 5.5 years, it is still a patronized company. No one else is. There's been no other support outside the business. We have grown from Northern Virginia to 7 other states. We have 200 employees now. We actually are in your district in Fort Wayne. And we recently last year, so now this is kind of me rounding this out, we recently last year got a phone call, and this is how we've expanded the company. Typically our past performance, people go away, they go to other projects, they go around different areas, they call us later, like, we're having a problem here, right? Nobody thinks about the toilets until the toilets are a problem, right? We get a call, someone's like, hey, do you think this is exactly how I went to Indiana? So last year we get a call, do you think you guys would go to Texas? We've never gone across the Mississippi at that point, right? So this is a big deal for us. So like, all right, this is what we do, right? Patrick and I jump on a plane, we fly down to Texas, Haskell County, and we just start doing what we know how to do, right? We just start reconnaissance, we just look around, we meet with people, we talk to the leadership in Haskell County, we talk to the mayor, we talk to the city manager, we talk to the county judge. We ask a lot of questions. And, we made the business decision of, is this something that we can support? It's funny because as we were sort of preparing to talk about this, a few weeks ago, we had a conversation we did end up starting in Texas.
Good choice.
Yeah. Great choice, for a lot of reasons. Yeah. But we did
We're not
end
competitive.
we did end up starting in Texas.
They make money.
We did end up starting in Texas, and we were putting an analysis together for our customer down there, and we were talking about how much we had, what it took to invest in order to start in Texas, right? What matters about us starting in Texas is that we now went from no presence there. We hired 24 people locally to support our operation there. The 24 people that we've hired locally there, they are represented by also other fellow veterans, all types of people, all walks of life, but you can imagine by what we do, like Patrick and I have both cleaned thousands of toilets, right, ourselves, back in the time when we were growing a business. The type of people that come to us looking for employment, right, it's a very specific type of person, it's a very blue collar type of person, it's a very blue collar type of mentality. We want to take care of them. What the benefits that we get from this, and this is where I think it matters the most, right? We put that analysis together, what it took for us to invest to start in Texas at the scale that we needed to go to. From day one, it wasn't like we were going to edge into this. It was day one, we had to go full capacity, ready to support. It cost us $4.6 million to get that started. Basically, the investment it took our business to get down there. Went back through doing some analysis to what this effort has saved us last year. Between Section 179, keeping the max rate static, and then the pass-through, it saved us $4.4 million. It was almost a one-for-one, and I didn't even make those numbers up, and I'm really good at making numbers up. Right, it's part of my job, I do now in business, but no, like that actually was like a one-for-one, right? So it goes to show you, and now, I mean, what that translates to, right? We have 200 employees. We have donated $1.2 million of our profits over our 5 years to support different foundations that basically support veterans' mental health as well as Gold Star families. That money has resulted in 7 different Gold Star children having college funded. I know personal experience in the business, supporting veterans' mental health. We have had impact. We have pulled people back from the ledge in a lot of ways that we can never do that. Now, the reason I tell you that story is because our purpose for our business, people have asked us recently, like, why do you guys still push so hard to grow the business? Like, why don't you sort of like slow down, right? Well, we have a purpose, right? For Patrick and I, that's why we do it. And we can share that purpose with our employees. They get behind it. Everybody drinks that Kool-Aid a little bit. They don't have to be veterans, right? But people get it. And because of the way that we can treat our people, look, everybody talks about, you know, I think it comes down to that sentiment of like, well, this is, you know, saving millionaires, right? And you mentioned your children like start a small business.
Yeah.
Don't have them start a small business.
Okay.
It's so hard.
It is extremely hard, yeah.
We joke about it. It's like, it's the most fun I never want to have again. But the impact that we can have if we continue to, you know, we have the ability to, people like us, and there's a lot of business owners like us, because we know a lot of them now by chance, right? We will take that money that we save, and we don't go out and buy second homes or cars or whatever people think that might happen with it. We want to invest it back in the business, because if we put it back in the business, that allows us to grow the business. That allows us to pursue our passion project, which is we can't donate time. We don't have any more time, but we can donate money back to support those causes. And the third impact of our mission that we didn't realize getting into this is we now have 200 employees, right? In the state of Texas, there's of those 24 that we support there, it's 84 mouths that we support. And we're paying them, they have full benefits, 401k with a company match. We have bonus programs set in place. We try to treat these people in a way, so you talked about a lot of direct impacts, right, of the counterparts here at the table, because you're kind of at the finish line of that. We're like in the intermediate step, but it flows through us to get down to our people, and it makes a huge impact. And to the extent that we can get one-for-one trade-offs like in Texas, where we can just say, hey, boom, we get this money back, we can reinvest it, that's all we want to do, right? So as a small business, to the extent, thank you for pushing those. I have a million different ideas of what could happen to make our lives easier as business owners. It is really difficult. It gets very complicated everywhere we go. I mean, we're paying for tax studies just to understand how we have to charge sales tax in different places, right? As a business owner, it's like, sentiment around the table, not a CPA, right? Love this country, wish I was a CFP, because it would be a lot easier. But these are things, to the extent that you guys keep pushing these efforts, we appreciate it. We will keep utilizing it as best we can. We want to keep growing, to keep doing the things that we do, because that's also, that's our therapy, right? For Patrick and I, that is why we do it.
And thank you for coming and sharing that. I know we've got conference in a little bit. I want to make sure that the members who are here have an opportunity to ask questions. I know Trey, say if you have something going on.
Yeah, I just want to point out that we really have talked about the trickle-down impact of the tax cuts. There are 51 million Americans who are not having to pay tax on Social Security. As a result, there's a 53% jump in restaurant spending just right after the tax refunds. A lot of it is from senior citizens. A lot probably DoorDash.
Yeah.
And for these folks that are hiring these people who are about paying taxes on tips, they're probably getting more tips. You're able to hire more people because of the tax cut.
Sure. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. That would be.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll give you a report from the great state of Wisconsin. Average return is $3,000. It's the highest that it's been in a long time in the state of Wisconsin for people getting refunds this year. And I would mention another part of the Working Families Bill is the child tax credit is now permanent and really important for these young families that are starting up. And so that's great. In addition, no taxes on tips over time and all the rest. And the other thing, a lot of farmers in my district, and the 100% bonus depreciation is a big deal for them and really helpful for them. So whether it's from Appleton to Beloit to Wausau across our state, we're hearing those stories about how important this is. And I would also point out that I believe no one on the other side of the aisle voted for this. No one voted for it. And some will tell you, yes, if you would have given me a standalone bill, I would have voted for it, whatever. Well, they had a chance to vote for this, and they chose not to. And I can confirm that they would not have voted for it based on what our governor just did last week in the state of Wisconsin, where he vetoed a bill that would have allowed no state income taxes on tips and overtime. He vetoed the bill, stiffing the hardworking people in the state of Wisconsin, the working class people in the state of Wisconsin. So we got a lot of work to do, and I would just close with this. I'm hearing a lot of people, it sounds like they're from Virginia. If you want to see this happen again next session of Congress, you have an incredibly important vote. And I hope you are paying attention to it. including telling your friends, relatives, and coworkers. Because if you want this to continue, next week's vote could decide.
Yeah, thank you, Beth, and thank you for the stories. This was really good feedback and really inspired by the stories. I've started businesses and I know how hard it is. But I know for Indiana, similar to Wisconsin, this is going to be an average tax cut of $3,000. Two big things that I want to point out is that Indiana is a major manufacturing hub, and reshoring policies, 100% immediate expensing for equipment and machinery. It encourages construction. I haven't seen as much building in northern Indiana as I have just seen recently. Companies are growing. In spite of the tariffs, which has created some volatility, people are still growing because they have this certainty within our tax policy. The other big one is the no tax on auto loan interest. And so, we need to build more Corvettes down in Elizabethtown. Those are beautiful cars.
Bowling Green.
That's right, it is Bowling Green. Okay, well anyway, close by.
Yeah.
And, I live in the Auto Belt between Detroit and Indianapolis and Kentucky. A lot of cars, I know in Texas, a lot of cars are built in Texas, but that's a big deal because the auto industry has seen a lot of foreign pressure. And so building cars here in the United States is a big deal, and giving the Americans an incentive to buy American cars is a great deal. So I am so excited, and kind of like we were talking earlier, everything else has gone up. Utilities, insurance, that's another big one that's really gone up recently. And our overhead is always just higher, but thankfully, because of the big beautiful bill, at least we know that our taxes are going to stay low, and we're going to see tax cuts for people that are really working hard. And that no tax on tips is a big deal for people that are working on a weekend at a restaurant. They can take that money home, not have to worry about it, and use it for their family. That's cash that really will make a big difference for them.
Gosh.
Representative Van Dyne and Palmer, I appreciate you convening this meeting this morning. What a perfect day to do this. I think that it's important that we go back and, after a major action by Congress, and evaluate how it's working and where it is in context with everything that's going on. The first context I think that we need to recall is that on December 16th, 1773, the American colonists created a revolt over taxation. And I can't help but think that with the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expiring, and taxes about to go up on the American citizens by $4.6 trillion, we might have been on the cusp of another such Tea Party. I look at some of our founding fathers, and I recognize that Thomas Jefferson and James Madison firmly believed that when a person mixes their labor with something, then it becomes their property. And I think that through the Working Families Tax Cuts Act, we've been able to keep folks holding their own property. I personally believe that, and I know that it's the principle of the folks that voted for this bill, that if you earned it, built it, or created it, then government shouldn't take it. It's government's job at that point to protect it. I appreciate the conversation and the stories from each and every one of our guests today. And I want to put your comments, hopefully, in this context, because we heard as we were moving along with this bill, we even heard one speech, 8 hours and 27 minutes long, talking about how bad this would be for Americans and how it was nothing more than an action for billionaires. How many of our guests here today are billionaires? Raise your hand. Personal billionaires. In my heart. Not really. I don't know a billionaire, but I know that folks like Heather Kell back in my district, a server behind the counter at a restaurant near my office, realized after no tax on tips and raising the standard deduction that she gets a $4,000 tax refund, something she's never had before. And I'm hearing stories like that all over the place. How many billionaires do folks know that are working for tips? How many billionaires do folks know that's punching the clock and working more than 40 hours and taking advantage of no tax on overtime? How many billionaires do you know that are receiving Social Security and taking advantage of the $6,000 write-off that we give them on that? This is not an action for billionaires. What we did here was for solid working class Americans. And I also have to point out, because the elderly are dear to me since I'm getting closer and closer to being classified as one, it's been said that the moral test of any government is how it treats its elderly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we have passed that moral test by enabling senior citizens to keep more of their hard-earned money and writing $6,000 off before they begin to file the tax return. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. You know, I think it's best to who you ask. My kids are already considered me elderly. So I do want to thank all of you for sharing your stories. And for those of you, and I'm hoping that you stick around, I would like to hear more about what you want to have included in the next tax bill. That's something that we are anxiously and currently working on, and we're going to have another opportunity at that apple. So hearing some of your thoughts on what would make it an even better bill, I think is everybody in this firm is anxious to hear. With that, I want to open it up and see if anybody from the press that's here today has any questions.
I'm just curious from sort of from the lawmaker's perspective, you guys addressed this a little bit, but what does it say to you guys as Americans pay taxes today that, Congressman Tiffany, you're right, no Democrats voted for this bill? And for those of you, if there were other anecdotes from your districts, what else sort of is a anecdote about other policies in the WFTC that you feel like are useful for Americans to know that aren't as high profile, like the no tax on tips? What other provisions, like even the Trump accounts, have been flying under the radar a little bit?
I would say, it's not related to taxes, but there's $50 billion in the bill for rural health care. That there are areas in all of our states that are maternal care deserts, where a woman who's pregnant might have to drive an hour, hour and a half. And I think President Trump called it one of the most historic films in the history of the country to directly address the rural health care. And that was the $50 billion comes out of the savings that he got and we're going to put in the bill.
I'd have to add, one of the pieces that folks don't understand is in that bill is remodeling our air traffic control system. Something that we know has been getting old and tired. Technology has far outpaced our ability to manage air traffic, and that helps us get off to a much greater start in creating safer and more efficient travel for folks around the country.
I think it's just probably practical dollars that are going out that people think about. I mean, the fact that, you know, we had a Secretary of Investment mentioned that over 20 million Americans now are taking advantage of those tax on tips. When we look at how much more they're getting, yeah, the average refund now is 11% higher than it was last year, but the amount of money that's gone out, which is over $220 billion, is 23% more than the refunds that were written last year. So these are real dollars going to real people's accounts. I mentioned the number earlier that if you're making $3,000 and you're a family of four, you're not paying any federal tax money. Those are not for billionaires. So this is for normal Americans like all of us that are around this table. And those things I don't think get talked about. I think the Democrats took off on this, oh, this is something for billionaires. But I think this roundtable is a perfect example. These are taxpayers, but this bill was meant for every single American, whether or not it's looking at the standard deduction or looking at loans and the child deduction, setting up the trust accounts, you know, for future Americans. All of those things are supposed to help government get less, people who are working and earning to be more.
As you're looking at the next one, I'm sure we would all appreciate a tax credit for conservative journalists too.
Yeah. Any other questions?
They're not about it.
Can I also add that in one of the subcommittees I sit on, we had the IRS tell us that 1 out of every 4 tax returns that they've seen so far are taking advantage of these new provisions for working class Americans.
Congressman Stetson, is your question?
No, if there's another question from a reporter, I was gonna let him, but I would follow up on that. I think the other piece is the energy policy. Even though right now we're seeing a spike in gas prices because of the Iranian conflict, in the long run, I think energy is also what we all measure ourselves by and how we feel about the economy. And with the exploration of the new opportunities in Alaska, with the new production and technology, pipelines, America is an energy powerhouse, and I think that makes a big difference for the American people. But also the Trump accounts, I think, is one of the most brilliant things we could have ever done. It'll be one of the greatest transfers of wealth from one generation to another generation, and it's done voluntarily. It's not done by taxation or forcing people to put their money into somehow diverting it to avoid taxes by the government. This is a voluntary program, and I think it has will have a huge impact.
Well, I think the last thing, piggybacking on what everyone said, is when Americans get to keep more of their money and build generational wealth, that means less strain on our welfare system.
That's right.
And we can shrink government, save more, invest more, et cetera. So I think that's very key.
And I think as Will mentioned, with small businesses, they invest actually in their and they invest in employees. I think it's why you're also seeing for the first time in years that wages now have outpaced inflation.
Yep.
I mean, this is obviously the indicator of it.
Yep.
Will, you had mentioned some other thoughts that you had and just want some of the other members who still here that could make the next bill a little bit stronger.
One thing that sticks out to me is, because we've seen this a lot, the overtime thing is that's awesome. That's super helpful, right? Because I think a lot of small businesses as well, there's a point where you really are going like paycheck to paycheck from a payroll perspective of like, are we going to make payroll, right? And overtime is one of those triggers that when you start kicking that overtime, it really starts to dig deep in your pocket. So that is super helpful. But one thing I was thinking about is, we as a company use, we like to sort of do, we call it like a profit sharing plan, but really it's sort of some hybrid of that, where we do have a bonus structure, right? And this is within a very simple, like sort of blue collar business, right? It's nothing fancy, but we want to incentivize people to work hard or volunteer for work. Like, we don't like to tell anybody to do anything. And if there was some way to make it so that bonus type payments, maybe below a certain threshold of total income or something, would also be exempt from taxes, right? Because we're not talking about, this isn't a bonus that you might see on Wall Street or something where it's like, double your salary, right? This is like a few $100s here, $1,000 there, those types of things. It's intentional, it is meaningful, especially, right? If you give somebody works on a weekend, to your point, right? Like your employees, they go home with the $300 in tips, right? We want people to volunteer for work. We literally will give them $300, right? And that's for your volunteering to work on a weekend. You're still gonna make your hourly wage, which is in the overtime, right? But we wanna incentivize that. But then it gets hit harder, right? And we've experimented with grossing up those payments, but we have 200 employees now, right? So at some point that gets to be untenable too. We can't, if we start eating that adds up fast, right? So that is one big thing that hits us really hard. And I sit back and I look at, when we run payroll weekly and we see those bonuses kind of come through, and it's just like, man, it's a hard hit, And I think incrementally, again, we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars. These are just relatively small payments. It's a lot of like attaboy type stuff.
Yeah.
You want to incentivize for hard work.
Absolutely.
And that's one way to do
And
it. You want
recognize
to
it.
have freedom to be able to do it.
And recognize when we can take somebody aside and give them a spot bonus, like an impact, we call it an impact bonus, right? Like literally grab somebody up, do it in front of other people, right? Praise in public, like, hey, you did an awesome job handling this event or getting through this tough situation with the customer or whatever. We're recognizing that. And in fact, people love to get a pat on the back, but like financially, that makes the biggest difference, right? That makes everybody happy.
There's nothing more deflating than doing a Christmas bonus, and you're gonna give $500, and you get 430
every year. Every year we have angry employees show up because they've not experienced it, because maybe they have not experienced employment where they were given a bonus.
Yeah.
and they show up and they're like, what is this, right? And it's like, we gave you your bonus, like, I can't control what happens at that line. Yeah, that's
That's
a
a
big
great,
one.
that's actually great. I do the same thing in my stats. That's great. Yeah, I want to think.
May I add just one
Yeah,
thing?
please.
So just one thing you might consider too, legislators, is when you're dealing with like young babies, right, and you're giving them the opportunity to invest in the market, I think one thing, and you might be able to speak to this, Mr. Butterworth, and you as well, Mr. D'Amico, forgive me. But the tip economy, they go into the workforce where people aren't financially necessarily as literate. So I think incentivizing the workforce to invest those tips through more tax benefits or tax benefits against the capital gains on those tips and cap it, you're incentivizing those people to move that money into the market and think about the future. So that might be something to think about.
Can I offer one thing because of these small business owners? I wish we could find a way to help small businesses when they sell or exit to be able to move those capital gains into a retirement account, because so many small businesses, we don't have savings accounts because we're putting all of our money into our business. So I have floated that idea before. If you have an exit, you could have, maybe 5 million or 10 million moved directly into an IRA and have some sort of tax benefit to do that, to really reward that growth. So
Yeah.
Love that idea.
no,
You don't think so?
I appreciate all of you being here today. And did you have?
Yeah, just very quickly, Representative Tiffany mentioned that Wisconsin recently declined to follow the example that you all set with the no taxes on tips and overtime. I've lived in Virginia for the last 2 years, which used to be a mercy, having lived in DC. Now with the new leadership, I'm bracing for impact.
Not so great.
Bought another gun just to be safe before they take that away too. But
Texas
I think-
has an open door policy.
I think the beauty of to turn it into a positive, the beauty of what you all did with this bill is that you can infiltrate the bluest state in the country. This is the federal level. You don't have to rely on Gavin Newsom or Abby Spanberger or one of these people to take their own citizens' best interests. You can do it. And that may, change some minds. Like I said, folks were talking about it who probably don't usually discuss fiscal policy in their day-to-day. And, gives you guys the ability to make inroads. It was already a pretty historic election in 2024. And any opportunity to expand this, whether it's increasing limits, diversifying the types of exemptions, you can make those inroads again in places that normally would be untouchable because they have leadership that wouldn't consider something like that for the average worker. So.
But to that point, make sure that you're taking credit for these things. I mean, that's the thing that's frustrating is you see a lot of that muddled water of people saying, oh, this is because of liberal policies. We're living in a blue state. You guys really need to make sure that you're taking credit for all the good things that you're doing.
That's a great way to end that. Thank all of you at the table and happy tax.
Thank you.
Thank you. Never said that before.